If you consider yourself a worldly individual, a DIY mastermind, or a courier who could stand a pay rise, here's our guide on how to be a professional smuggler.
What are you transporting?
What's the cargo?
Smuggling as a profession is nearly as old as time itself. As for as long as there have been laws on what people can and can't have, there have always been smugglers to fill an unmet demand. When you break it down, smuggling is simply moving something from one place to another, regardless of the laws trying to stop you.
We're in business!
This can mean anything, from weapons, drugs, wildlife, or on one occasion, 7,000 donkey dicks. But that's a story for another time. To get started, you'll need to make some contacts. After all, you're not in the business of making drugs, selling weapons, or breeding hippos. You merely transport these goods from where they are to where they need to be. To make these contacts, you have a number of options. In this business, you might start with moving goods for your local dealer. But as you move higher up the chain, sooner or later you're going to meet some people involved with organized crime. In the criminal underworld, these guys are your Fortune 500 companies, and if they like your resume, they might want to keep you on their list of contacts. The advantage of making friends with these guys is that they're notoriously reliable and have everything you might need in terms of criminal infrastructure. Cartels usually don't bother trying to sell their product on the streets of a foreign country, so they're usually more than happy to sell in bulk and take their money up front. From here, you just have to find yourself a few dealers willing to take the stuff off your hands, and you're basically a courier making more than a doctor. With this in mind, this is small-time work in the smuggling world, as the hardest and consequently most risky part is transporting goods from one country to another. Smuggling under the banner of an organized crime has its advantages, but it's also a double-edged sword. On the upside, you don't get to remain as a criminal enterprise without being good at what you do. These guys know who they can bribe, which ports of entry are the safest, and will be able to deal in quantities that a single enterprising individual could only dream of achieving. On top of this, they'll have every incentive to keep you off the radar and have your work unimpeded. So if they can call in a favor for authorities to leave you alone, they likely won't hesitate. On the other hand, smuggling for an organized crime outfit means they, not the authorities, are the scariest people in your life.
If you're gonna give me a sob story, I'm gonna rip your fucking throat out and shove a turd down the hole!
Talking to anyone about the operation, skimming from the top, or getting caught are all enough of a reason to end up buried in the desert, and these guys aren't known to give out second chances. On top of this, having a shipment caught and seized is merely the cost of doing business in the organized crime world, meaning quite unfortunately, your life is inherently expendable to them. There will always be desperate people looking to risk their freedom for easy money, just like there will always be a demand for whatever is being illegally smuggled. If you're trying to start up your very own criminal enterprise, you probably want to appear everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Lucky for you, today's sponsor, Surfshark VPN, has these needs covered. As you're probably already aware by now, Surfshark has plenty of security features to keep you safe from trackers, malware, and phishing attempts. But that's just scratching the surface when it comes to the full list of benefits. Something everyone will appreciate is Surfshark's Clean Web feature, which removes ads, banners, and pop-ups from bothering you online. Whoever decided to invent them are the real criminals. Of course, even a big-time kingpin needs to relax, which is why you'll also appreciate Surfshark's ability to effortlessly skirt around region locks to access any content you like. If Bin Laden can get a hold of DVD copies of Cars while hiding from the CIA, you should have no problem watching Cars 2 all these years later. It really is a great time to sign up to Surfshark, because by going to surfshark.com/surswag, or by scanning the code on screen, you'll be able to score yourself an extra 4 months for free. The best part is that if Surfshark doesn't meet your expectations in any way at all, you can cancel within the first 30 days and get a full refund. No questions asked. Surfshark VPN. It's cheaper than the other ones. Perhaps you've decided against working for organized crime and want to instead branch out on your own. In this case, you're starting from scratch, meaning you either need to know someone who needs goods moved, or you need to make those contacts yourself. Finding them yourself isn't exactly the easiest method, but the good news is that you now get to take a holiday.
I wanted to buy some weed,
Makes you think we'd have weed.
If you want to be smuggling not-so-legal goods, you'll want to be going directly to the source, which often means traveling to some of the most lawless and dangerous places on Earth. In the past, Afghanistan was a goldmine for poppy cultivation, once producing up to 90% of all heroin in the world. Unfortunately for a morally bankrupt individual such as yourself, this is no longer the case, as the Taliban have since cracked down on its production, cementing their reputations as the ultimate fun police. Although not quite the holy grail of drug production it once was, the takeover by the Taliban led a whole new opportunity for enterprising business people to make their millions. When the US military packed up and left, it was cheaper for them to leave a large stockpile of weapons and equipment behind, a stockpile which is just waiting to be sold. It should be noted that a huge portion of this equipment usually only functions through the tireless maintenance of 19-year-old recruits called Trent, meaning a lot of it is already reaching or past its expiry date. Guns, grenades, and mortars, on the other hand, have a much longer shelf life. Meaning if you can get cozy with the right people and grease the right wheels, you'll be able to score yourself military-grade weapons by the truckload. As long as you have enough time, patience, and money, you're bound to find someone who will introduce you to the right people. In general, Western-style business is usually shorter and more focused on achieving tangible agreements.
I think right there would be about $10 if Biden wasn't president. All right, well, he is, and this is $25.
While the Middle East is more of a high-context culture, meaning relationship building is more of a priority. It's important to know that building up a relationship, especially to buy appropriated American arms, might take a while, so it's best to settle in and get more ingrained in the local customs. Once you eventually have an in, however, they might see cash coming their way, and you'll never have to worry about a supply of fresh weapons again. If you're lucky, the guys selling the weapons will be able to get your newly acquired merchandise out of the country without any more trouble. But this is where things become tricky. No country on Earth has officially recognized the Taliban rule of Afghanistan, meaning it doesn't matter how many special seals of approval they give you, no customs official is going to let a big stockpile of weapons pass unchecked. This leaves you with a few options. The first is to simply bribe your way to success. This may seem pretty straightforward, but it also means sizing up border officials and running the risk of getting someone who isn't as morally flexible as yourself.
Family and I got into a heated game of road bingo and,
Cut the shit.
Cartels and organized crime syndicates have the luxury of being inherently terrifying. But for small-time smugglers, border agents tend to flip very quickly if they start feeling the heat. The good news is that you have all the time in the world to actually get the cargo from one destination to another, meaning you can schedule a nice, complicated path to obscure where it originally came from. Sending the stuff by ship has its advantages, because not only can they hold enough cargo for a small country, but your merchandise can easily be concealed among legitimate products without anyone looking twice. Maybe schedule a stop off in West Africa or East Asia, where wages aren't so high.
It's worth billions.
now so are you.
There are always underpaid port workers who can fake cover documents for your journey, meaning instead of a stash of abandoned M4A1s taken from Afghanistan, you merely have crates full of medical equipment from the Netherlands. Going over land is another beast entirely, but generally, as long as the public can't see your goods, you're not likely to get searched outside of a border or checkpoint. On top of this, thoroughly checking your vehicle takes a really long time, so there's a good chance you'll get away with your cargo if it's properly hidden. Hiding contraband in spare wheels, hollow beams that make up the frame, empty space in the engine bay, or even in seat cushions will all pass a visual inspection. If you wanted to go a step further, some creative smugglers have packaged their goods watertight and hid them inside the fuel tank. Extremely well-equipped smugglers have been able to impregnate drugs into other objects, making them impossible to detect without specific testing. This means that even if guards open up a cardboard box and inspect every item inside, they won't expect that the box itself is partly made up of Colombia's biggest export. Of course, this all involves the help of skilled chemists to ever have a hope in hell of pulling it off. But in theory, half the stuff in a truck could be holding trace levels of illegal substances ready to be extracted. In this sense,
The only limit is yourself.
you also have to consider which direction your product is heading. On the border of US and Mexico, for example, vehicles tend to be scanned and searched much more thoroughly when coming into the United States. But authorities are much laxer when entering Mexico. In terms of gun smuggling from the US into Mexico, most arrests caught by border security are simply rivals informing their competition. Meaning if you keep a low profile, it can be a lot less risky than you might realize. In general, it's good to plan for what methods and equipment will be used at each border, and only send send big shipments when you've already got authorities in your back pocket. Another way to get your goods through safely is to find yourself an in at a reputable shipping company. In this case, the goods can be swapped for your own without too much hassle. And while all the paperwork might say tubs of washing powder, they will instead be tubs of whatever other powder you'll be able to fill them with. As you may have noticed, a lot of this profession involves networking and finding reliable people who won't crack under pressure. And fostering your people skills will be important on your path to success. Even doing something as simple as taping gun parts to a person's legs and walking across a border should be carried out by someone who doesn't look anything near the manifestation of a typical criminal.
Miles, the black one!
Most cultures around the world don't like the thought of body searching a sweet old lady. A well-presented family man with a yee-ass haircut probably isn't going to be suspected to smuggle contraband, and an attractive woman might throw border security off their A-game. A lot of geniuses get the bright idea of stuffing substances into balloons and having couriers swallow them.
You don't have crack on you? What's this, bro?
Bro, that is not crack, bro.
Meth?
No, that's nothing, bro.
Right, because you ate it all.
No, I did not.
Which would let it pass through security with nothing on their person. The only problem is that there's only so much a person can swallow, meaning you gotta recruit half a fucking army to start seeing any decent returns. More people means more money, and more fingers which might point in your direction. On top of this, you're basically filling people with ticking time bombs, which will kill them if they don't get it out in time, meaning this method is as ineffective as it is stupid. Whatever you do, just make sure everyone in your supply chain is both well prepared, reliable, and compensated enough to keep their involvement on the down low. More importantly, it's best to keep as many members of your logistics network as isolated as possible from one another. This means that in the event that one of the members are caught, they can't bring down the entire operation. To go one step further, it would also be diligent to offer insurance to all members of your organization, where in the event they do get caught, their prison time will be generously compensated. Authorities will often grant very tempting deals for low-level runners to give up people higher in the chain, so you'll need to give them ample incentive to pretend they know nothing. Once again, this is just the cost of doing business. Let's assume, for example, you manage to make friends with Afghanistan and get a big load of weaponry out of the country. Now what? The most obvious answer is to get them somewhere with high demand. The African coup belt is always in need of a fresh batch of weapons and ammo. And oftentimes they'll be able to pay in high-value commodities such as gold or diamonds. You also have to keep in mind that customers in richer countries will likely pay more than those in poorer nations. Richer countries also tend to be more stable, meaning the demand for drugs is usually a lot higher than the demand for weapons. You also have to consider the supply for each country. You shouldn't expect to make much cash trying to import drugs into Colombia. And at the same time, we shouldn't have to explain why smuggling rifles into Texas is a monumental waste of time. With this in mind, you might be able to double dip on a single trip if you plan your route with enough care. Since 2023, Myanmar has become the biggest cultivator of poppy plants anywhere in the world, meaning if you wanted to get stocked up on a supply, there would be your best bet. Viewers paying attention may also know that the nation has been suffering through a civil war since this stupid hat-wearing dickhead overthrew the government in 2021. This means that an enterprising smuggler such as yourself will be able to trade your shiny stock of weapons for an absolute mountain of drugs, a product which will gain exponentially more value as it hits the streets of a wealthy country. These are the fun life tips that you just won't get from the BBC. The more of the supply chain you control, the more money you're positioned to make. But once again, this is a guide on how to be a smuggler, not how to distribute your goods to the end consumer. Just wholesale what you can to whoever is willing to take your entire stock and let them shoulder the remaining risk. Your job is done. One of the best things about getting into the smuggling business is that it really does cater to all of the different experiences and skill sets. Perhaps you're a pilot who can use remote, off-the-grid airfields. Maybe you're a chemist who can impregnate drugs into everyday objects. Or maybe you're just, a Mr. Worldwide who can relate to people no matter the culture.
Some mushrooms, they're fun. I'm doing them tomorrow for my birthday, actually.
I don't think we're really a shrooms crowd.
We haven't even mentioned some of the more creative ways to get around border checkpoints, with some cartels even using submarines to ship their goods undetected. Although, the cost of such a vessel is estimated to be around $2 million US. The amount of product inside can easily net up to 100 million for a single load, making them worthwhile for even a one-way trip. Other aspiring smugglers have also dabbled in using drones goods as a way to discreetly get around authorities. And although this can work in some instances, this can be very difficult if border agents are equipped to deal with such systems. Worst case scenario, your drone gets hijacked, and you've just made a very generous donation to the agency in place to have you arrested. A lower tech solution, which has also been tested, is the use of trebuchets, which can fire 60-kilogram projectiles 350 meters. If you're looking for a more long-term method, however, then not much can beat a well-hidden tunnel. Hundreds of tunnels have been constructed between the US and Mexico alone, and the entrances of which are usually hidden within buildings owned by members of a cartel. This is, however, one of the most costly and time-consuming options, and you'll need to get yourself some experts in the field if you're going to keep it ventilated, well-lit, and safe. Extra precautions should be taken when building tunnels, as all it takes is a nosy neighbor reporting a suspicious amount of construction, and the entire investment is now worth nothing. Needless to say, if you have a special skill, you can probably use it to smuggle something. Once you've got your operation up and running, you'll also want to consider everything else that comes with being a part of a successful underground business. You'll firstly want to learn how to clean your money so you can explain it when the taxman comes knocking. This is quite a complicated process, so viewers who are interested can request a follow-up guide down below. Your next priority is to make sure you can keep yourself in business with a bit of job security. The most obvious way to do this, and the majority of what we've mentioned in this guide, is how to do this job without getting caught. The other end is making sure that you've always got a reliable customer base, and this comes in the form of gently guiding market forces. This will also involve shifting lawmaker attitudes towards your smuggled product. See, if your livelihood depends on moving illegal shit across borders without anyone finding out, you'll want to do everything in your power to make sure that whatever you move stays illegal. The last thing you, drug dealers, or cartels want is for governments to start decriminalizing and regulating illegal substances. Once the government starts handing out perfectly synthesized drugs and treating the drug epidemic as a health matter, your market basically dries up overnight. No drug user is going to bankrupt themselves for your cut-up, stepped-on shit, when they can get better and safer stuff for free, meaning your career as a smuggler is now over. With this in mind, you'll want to pay off lobbying groups, run social media bot farms, and start grassroots organizations designed to vilify drug users as a scourge on society.
This is crack.
Whip up public outcry calling for lawmakers to be tougher on drugs. Start boosting stories about drug users who steal to fuel their addiction. And always paint the solution as more police and more prisons.
I get angry just thinking about it makes me mad. Little kids doing drugs, it turns my stomach.
Although this might seem counterintuitive, this is the best way you can ensure the demand of your products will always hold strong. On top of this, with every large-scale drug bust comes a hole in the market just waiting to be filled. Meaning every time someone else goes down, you only grow bigger, richer, and more equipped to best ply your trade. There are no antitrust laws for criminal enterprises, meaning once you have a monopoly, you really do have unlimited resources to drive your empire. As long as people are stupid enough to think they can win the war on drugs by treating it as a criminal issue, you'll always be there to rack up those Benjamins. If our guide helped you move illegal substances, or you're a seasoned drug smuggler looking to share your own tips, we'd love to hear what you have to say in the comments. This is an educational channel after all, and if we all band together, we might all enjoy the wonderful gift of knowledge. As always, I've been Cody from the Swag News team, and on behalf of all of us, have a fucking good one.
I could smoke cocaine for hours, start talking to the flowers, and act like I'm insane. I could rob convenience stores and hang out with crack whores if I didn't have a brain. I could see my life start narrowing as I started shooting heroin, 1 foot into the grave. I could sleep in street gutters and steal money from my mother if I didn't have a brain. Oh, I like to get high, run naked down the street, and when I run a little bit too far, I throw up in some cop's car.